Welcome to Columbia Yacht Club's Legacy Series. We're here today with my father, Bob Cooley, who has been a member of the Columbia Yacht Club since 1952. I want to thank you for being here with us today.
On my 95th birthday.
Tell us, how did you get involved with Columbia Yacht Club in the first place?
Well, a friend of mine in Chicago was the son of the Commodore, who was John Metzenberg at the time. He has a friend, his son Carl and I had gotten acquainted, and he took me sailing on his father's yacht, which was a 45-foot schooner named Undine. So I really enjoyed the sailing, a couple of trips, and I decided I wanted to buy a boat and become a yachtsman.
You joined in 1952. A couple years later, on the Florida, there was a big fire. What do you remember about that day?
I was working in the Palmolive building at the time, which has turned into the Playboy building, and then back. I was on the 36th floor, and somebody said there's a fire south. My window looked north over the Drake Hotel at Oak Street Beach. I went to the opposite side of the south side of the building and looked out and saw that the fire was Columbia. At that time I had a sailing dinghy on the dock there. I was a little concerned, but fortunately a lot of people had moved the dinghies away from the fire and it never burned the docks.
How were you involved at all with the cleanup and refurbishing of the club? Or?
It was a bit of a mess. They had filled it full of water, so fish had moved in, and all of the food in the galley, of course, had rotted. When we pumped the water out, it left a lot of dead fish and garbage, which we hauled out in huge GI cans and had to haul it away. We certainly didn't dump it back in the harbor. There were a lot of dead fish. Not a fun trip.
Now, when they redecorated or refurbished the Florida after that, some things changed, right?
The restaurant and bar had been down below decks, and it was now moved up onto the foredeck. The regular deck had a nice bar with a view of the harbor. The galley was there, and you could eat on the same level as you walked in on.
Now, it wasn't until years later that they needed to finally upgrade the club ship. What do you remember about that?
They were concerned that it was getting a little thin at the waterline, rust and old age, and they were concerned that possibly a chunk of ice might make a hole and we'd be in trouble. So before too many winters, we decided we'd better replace it.
Did you serve as an officer or on the board at all? And
Much later, I was on the board of directors, and for several years under different commodores.
now, normally there's no controversy about electing a new commodore.
Usually there isn't. I don't know how it happened, but at that time that I was on the board, Chester Cutner, one of the old-time members of the club, was slightly disenchanted with the person that had been nominated. He talked me into running as his mate as vice commodore if he was to be commodore. I don't remember who we ran against, but we lost.
So tell us about some of the sailing that went on in those early years. There were some one design fleets.
When I first joined, they had US one designs, a rather large open boat, around 36 or 7 feet. I crewed on one of those at one time and enjoyed it, but they were a very big boat. Later they had Solings, they had Dragons.
What was your first boat? That you
I
had?
bought a Snipe. I bought it friend and I went out to look at a boat, and Hutch was my friend. We looked at the boat in the backyard, advertised for $200 or $300, and it was sitting on the grass growing up through cracks between the planks. No way we wanted to buy it. But as we left, my friend Hutch said, well, if you can't get rid of it, we'll give you $50 and take it out of your yard. A week later, the guy called us, and we were stuck with it. So that was my first. It cost us about $300 to get it in the water. Then we had to buy new sails because the old cotton sails rotted. The minute we tried to hoist them, they all ripped at the seams. So we called up Marty Nielsen, who was a sailmaker. Marty said, do you want racing sails or cruising sails? We said, what's the difference? He said, $50. So we went with the cruising.
But did you have the Penguin first though? Or the
Oh
Tumbler?
yeah, I had the Penguin.
How did you end up getting the Penguin?
Fran Byrne had talked me into it. When I had a Snipe, which leaked badly, but we had gotten it swelled up to the point where we could sail it, he talked me into buying a partially finished Penguin. They had been building Penguins over the winter on the club ship. They must have built 8 or 10 of them, and one of them was not quite completed, but the owner didn't want to really sail it. He had a bigger boat. So I bought that and finished it and painted it red on the inside and green on the outside.
I remember that you had to carry a few water bottles on the boat because your crew didn't weigh enough. Do you remember that?
I think I remember something about it. You probably remember
yeah,
better than I do.
I remember that because it's a two-person boat.
Yeah,
You had
right.
a
Yeah,
person on the tiller and somebody to
Yeah.
hike on either side.
yeah. And you as a crew were not heavy
Yeah,
enough.
the two of us even
Yeah.
weren't heavy enough,
To
so
make them
I think
yeah.
that they made you carry some water
Yeah.
bottles. Then you had the Tumbler.
Yeah.
Right?
Tumbler was a nice boat. We had a little fleet, and I cruised it a little bit. It was a good boat. but
Really cruised that Tumbler?
I think I just cruised up the lake
Yeah.
a little way, Racine and back, something like that. No, I did. I cruised it across the lake once with your mother.
Huh?
Uh,
Okay.
Yeah, I remember we sailed all
There's
night.
no cockpit in that boat.
No.
It's an open boat.
Open. No, it had a cockpit.
I mean, not a cockpit. It didn't have a cabin.
It had a cabin, but it was basic. You
Yeah.
had two mattresses. You could, well, as I say, your mother and I cruised
Right.
it across the lake.
So that was possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there are pictures in the yacht club of Tumblerans,
Yes,
and they don't like the kind of boat I would want to take across the lake. But
they're okay. That was a small fleet. We had about 8 or 9 boats, but it was a double-ended boat. Mine was called All Splint, which is apparently Swedish for darling.
okay.
I sailed it for quite some time, enjoyed it.
Somewhere around 1960, I believe, you upgraded.
I bought a Tripp 30, which was a fiberglass 30-footer built in Holland and shipped over in the hold of a cargo ship, which came through the Great Lakes and dropped the boat off, or it was taken out of the hold down in South Chicago. I let the broker that I bought it from bring it up and rig it and put the mast in, and I took delivery on a mooring quite close to Chicago's Yacht Club.
You did race that boat.
I did race it quite a bit.
Tell us about the Mac race that you did on that boat.
Well, that was the last year I owned it. That's the only race I hadn't done on it. I did lots of Michigan cities and Sturgeon Bay races, Tri-State races.
As a matter of fact, that boat, you did an oil painting of that boat, which is right behind you right now.
Oh, yes.
So, but yeah, tell us about that Mac race.
Well, I was the smallest boat in the race, the lowest rating, and it turned into a kind of a heavier run, and up above the Manitous, we were running, and we had a vang set, and as the wind had changed a bit, we should have taken the vang off, and we got a knockdown and dipped the boom and broke it. It was a wooden boom. So fortunately, we had an extra spinnaker pole besides the one that we were flying a chute from, and we lashed it with everybody's belt, lashed it alongside the cracked boom, and managed to finish the race,
Finish the race.
without taking the main down.
You didn't win that race though?
No, we didn't. Far from it.
That wasn't your first Mac though, right?
No,
What was your first Mac?
my first Mac was on a schooner, Happy Holiday. I think it was about 45 feet or more, owned by Roman Burkowski. And Roman was a fine sailor, but that Mac, we started on Saturday. It was a light beat most of the way. We didn't finish till Thursday. The slowest Mac I ever was involved with.
We're going to get to the characters that you remember. One of them I know is Chester Cutner, and you sailed a number of Mackinac races on
I
Cuddy's
sailed
Ark.
quite a few of them, yes. One that I specifically remember was we were in a squall up in the Manitous, and it was thunder and lightning and rain, and suddenly St. Elmo's fire appeared on the rigging. These balls of fire seemed to move up and down the metal stays. I was told that it was okay, you could touch the stays, but I didn't test it.
You declined.
I declined.
A couple of boats that you raced on that were owned by Lynn Williams, right?
I sailed on Dora 3, which was about a 50-foot Gary Mull boat, and we did extremely well. We won, and I think that was the year that Turner brought a 12-meter in to race against these inland boats, and he finished ahead of us, but we beat him on corrected time, and he came aboard after the race, and we were all lounging around resting, and he came and looked the boat over and shook everybody's hands. That was the first time I met Turner. I raced against him a lot more times in the times to come.
Now, after Dora 3, Lynn Williams got another boat.
Dora 3 was a Gary Mull design. I don't know why he didn't like it. He did very well with it. I sailed a St. Pete Lauderdale race on that boat, and I think we did fairly well. We didn't win it, but we were respectable. But for some reason, he went to Sparkman Stevens and got a brand new Sparkman Stevens boat built up in Palmer Johnson's up in Wisconsin. I went up there and observed it while it was being built. Beautiful.
That boat eventually did get sold to Ted Turner.
Yeah.
And
We sailed it for several years. I did several Mackinacs, and I did 2 Bermuda races on it. One was a terrible race, and one was just, all we did was change chutes from light to heavy.
And then after he sold that boat to Ted Turner, it was in the infamous 1979 Fastnet.
Fastnet, yes.
And they actually won that race
They
with
won
that
it.
boat.
Yeah.
And then after that, you raced on a boat named Namus.
That's right. I sailed a lot of Great Lakes races, Port Huron Mac, Chicago Mac. You sailed with me.
I
on
was
quite a
lucky
few
enough
of
to get a
those.
spot on that
Yeah.
boat, yeah.
I also sailed down south on it. He took it down south, and I raced a couple of Miami-Nassau races on that.
Now, who are some of the characters that you sailed a lot with, that you were friends with, that really stand out? Fran Byrne,
Fran, of course.
right?
Fran was just great. he's the guy that talked me into getting rid of the Snipe and getting a penguin and learning how to race, which is how I learned how to race.
Wow.
Was racing penguins around the harbor. I remember coming up behind Fran one time and being told or shown very graphically that I wasn't going to pass him to windward. He gave me a big luff.
What would you consider as your greatest legacy to Columbia?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know much about legacies. I loved being a member there. It was a great club. It
Still is.
still is. I wish I could spend more time there. Whenever I'm in Chicago, I certainly make that as one of my home bases.
Right.
I'm glad that I got my son into sailing and that he now has a boat right next door to Chicago, or to Columbia.
Yes.
And
And that is me, by the way.
yes, that's Dan.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks for doing this legacy series video with us. We really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed doing it.
Thanks.